All right, Adam, I guess I'm going to enjoy this hemp beverage while I still
And what do you got there?
can.
Bluff Punch Pop? I haven't
Yeah,
seen
so
that
this is
before.
a cannabis operator in the state of Illinois. They actually have a social equity license and they're
Okay.
funding their social equity license through their hemp operation
Oh,
now.
that's
So
super cool. Does that say 50 megs?
yeah, this one is 50 megs, so it's just for me, right?
Yeah.
But there are 10 milligram, 4 milligram drinks as well. So they've got, dosages for all sizes. And on that note, I want to just give a plug before we get into the topic, the subject matter of today for you. Folks go to drinkcantrip.com. They've got awesome drinks. Of course, you must be 21 years of age or older to order. Once again, drinkcantrip.com. Adam, you wanted to say anything to introduce yourself or Cantrip?
Yeah, we will check your IDs at checkout, so please expect that.
There you go.
Yeah,
There you
I'm
go.
the co-founder, CEO of Cantrip, longtime operator in the, medical marijuana adult use and now hemp spaces, and look forward to chatting with you about the insanity that is dealing with hemp laws in the United States.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sitting back down with me, Adam. I really appreciate it. Folks, if you want to follow Adam, I've got his Twitter on display right here, or X if you call it that. Yeah, like you just said, there was some madness today. I'm displaying on my screen right now. I was quite stunned. I knew this press conference was coming up, but I was stunned to see right here, you can see a Cantrip product
Hmm.
on display. For folks that missed the press conference, I know that you mentioned you didn't watch the whole thing either, but can you maybe get a highlight of what's going on in California right now?
Yeah, I mean the really short version is that just like if the whole story, the California legislature, ever since Total Wine and More launched hemp beverages in I think back in March, late March, earlier this year, the legislature has been very mad, led by a congresswoman named Aguilar Curry, who's then they tried to pass a bill called AB 2223, which would have restricted THC in hemp products down to 1 milligram. That was moving pretty handily through the legislature until Governor Newsom introduced a proposed amendment which would force all hemp products with THC in them through dispensaries, which effectively killed AB 2223 because it's like an ungodly complicated proposal, to be honest. If you know anything about how dispensary products are sold, it's a very complicated prospect to try to get basically non-metric THC products into the metric system, figure out how the taxes are going to work, particularly with how excise tax works in California, which is possibly the most complicated tax code in America, which is saying something. So this bill got killed because of what Newsom did, and frankly, I thought he kind of did that on purpose. Clearly, I was wrong, because now they're pushing for essentially an emergency rule, which will ban any hemp product with this is in the text, detectable amounts of THC. And they're also defining THC as anything basically with the letters THC in it. So THCO, Delta 9, Delta 8, Delta 10, all of these things are going to get lumped together. And if there's any detectable amount at all, then it can't be sold in the state of California, at least for 180 days under an emergency rule, during which time I'm sure they'll try to pass a more permanent rule, which seems like it's going to be done administratively and not through the legislature, which will probably be more effective at getting done. This is what they did in New York just about a year ago. But imagine any CBD product with any detectable amount of THC in it is no longer legal as well. So this is going to cause some pretty big ramifications in California. We'll see if anybody decides to file a lawsuit over it. I would expect somebody to, but I won't be doing it because frankly, I just don't have the heart at this point
Yeah.
to keep pursuing every single state like this. But my opinion is that this is short-termism. It's pretty virtue signaling. It's not actually going to address the problem because if you actually look at that table, I don't know about the gummies in particular, but every beverage brand on that, you can actually see our blackberry lavender poking out in the back there too. But
Oh yeah. There
um,
you go.
Endo, I know for a fact, is only sold at Total Wine in California. And so and North is sold at Total Wine. So I'm pretty confident they walked into a Total Wine where they do card people and only sell to adults, pulled them out and said, look at what the children are purchasing. And so, I don't, eventually California will come back to selling these products, I believe, in liquor stores and grocery stores, but maybe it'll take a couple years to get back there.
Yeah, I'm curious. That's what I noticed seemed to be the main theme of it was that kids could go in and like you say, if this seems to start with Total Wine, it's like places like that. So let me just put it this way. The only question that I actually think was asked about this topic at the end of this press conference was about, and you couldn't really hear it, but they said something to the effect of, isn't that kind of on the retailer if your
Yeah.
concern is about children getting it? Because that was the foundation of it all, Curious, what's your take on that? Because that really seemed, I mean, you seem to be leading the charge in many ways with your ID verification and everything else. So it's like, obviously you can meet, their concerns right where they
Yeah.
are.
Well, we also use on on our products child-resistant lids, which you can actually kind of see the yellow poking on the top of that root beer lid because briefly we
Yeah,
had
show that
yellow.
again if you don't mind.
Yeah, briefly we had yellow lids, and now we had a phase where on our lowest dose products, which is like these 5 milligram ones, we only use standard lids, which had people have argued are child resistant. I don't know if I agree with that, but the we because of Tennessee and Georgia law, we just switched everything back to those. So
Well,
right now, everything we produce is child resistant
that's
lids.
the hilarious part about this.
Yeah,
All of the products at Total Wine, which are where a
yeah.
lot of these products are sold, are not, I mean, are they child resistant?
Most of them aren't. Cantrip is a little bit unique in that we do offer child-resistant lids
Yeah,
because part of it's coming from the marijuana system, part of it is they're reclosable, and we sell multi-serving products. So by
right.
Minnesota state law, all products above 5 milligrams have to be multiple serving, and they have a cap at 2 servings. So to me, it was just logical. But we also still sell in some places where it's compliant 50 milligram beverages like you had there, and we put the reclosable lids on for that purpose too, because we see those more like spirits and
Right.
those I fundamentally believe need to have some sort of reclosability on them, whether that's a large format bottle or a small one. I mean, there's folks like you who will just drink the whole thing, and I think that's totally fine. But it's just for me, it's something that just makes sense from a product design perspective.
Yeah.
And so, I don't necessarily advocate for that everywhere, but I do think it's just good common sense. I mean, as far as like what this is clearly not you look at this press conference, it's like it's put together to like some staffer, I think, put this together to basically solve a problem that maybe the original bill author really wanted something like this. Maybe there really was pressure, but the fact that none of these products, if you actually, if someone reporter was able to dig in and find out like exactly how this all came together, definitely none of those products came from like a bodega where they're selling to children. I almost certainly, I don't know about the gummies, probably not the gummies, but everything else came from Total Wine, and they certainly would have been carded if they looked young enough. And if they had really looked at, they would have seen that child resistant lid. Ultimately, this is like a not this is not the highest priority communications point that the governor has ever had in his life or in his career. And so, they had one question about this actual program afterwards, and then immediately reporters switched to his most recent, vetoes on other bills because
Mhm.
ultimately this is really high stakes for people in the industry and people who like these products, but is incredibly low stakes for everybody else. And honestly, most people don't super care about this, but it's going to be a real disappointment for consumers across California who currently purchase this. I mean, these are not only available in Total Wine, but in BevMo across California, which is one of the biggest, alcohol retailers in that state. DoorDash has been there in California, GoPuff, and we work with a lot of legitimate distributors who want to be doing this. And so, like everybody who wants to do this, who will do it so long as like it follows the law which exists right now, which is AB 45, that everybody is going to pull their products. But the people that they're really worried about selling products to kids, in gas stations and bodegas are not going to pull their products because you may have noticed there's no actual enforcement mechanism in this thing other than TPH can go in and pull products, but they don't have the enforcement agents to do that across the state of California. They're relying on the fact that pretty much every brand you see on that table is going to voluntarily pull their products, or their distributors and retailers are going to force them to. And they're just the only things left will be what children purchase. In stores where children were going anyway. So it's just another, I mean, this happens in every state where they try to ban these products. It doesn't actually solve the problem, as opposed to Minnesota, which passed a bill taxing and regulating these products, putting them in liquor stores specifically, and then used all that money that they pulled in to hire 35 regulators who went, or inspectors who went into stores in January this year and have multiple times since, to look at labels, to check COAs on websites, and actually issue pull product orders for any brand that wasn't compliant. And they've done that now several times. It's caused distributors to actually ask for COAs up front. I have distributors in California who have my entire chain of sourcing going back to the original plant too, because they wanted to keep that on hand when DPH cracked down a few months ago. So the distributors are becoming de facto self-regulators as well. And ultimately, these bans aren't well thought out policy by people who are honestly like I really believe Gavin Newsom's a smart person. I just don't think he's being advised well, and I'm certain that this issue is not important enough for him to dig in on his own. And he's just going to go with whatever the local staffer says is most politic.
Right. I just don't get the idea that it's like on one hand he talked about what he did with cannabis and that they made this progressive decision to legalize it, but on the other hand he's talking about these products as if cannabis is so dangerous that it can only be sold from these certain places. What's your take on that? And do you agree with like my takeaway on?
I mean, I think. But like I said, I didn't hear all the audio, but this is like part and parcel of how
Right.
people view cannabis. I mean, this is
Hmm.
ultimately the Faustian wager that we made as activists basically 15 years ago, which is to say, cannabis, we understand it's been illegal for 80 years and we want to get it legalized. So we're going to agree that it's so dangerous it needs to go into these specialty one product retailers that have Fort Knox level security on them because God forbid a child know that it exists, and since people have built their entire companies around that system, now it's really dug in. I mean, ultimately, I don't like to speculate on like what people actually want all that much, but certainly are very high taxes on cannabis in California. And you know, the hemp industry has actually been begging to be taxed in California specifically, maybe even on par. I think we could probably survive that with the other stuff, but like the taxes aren't going well. A lot of the cannabis industry who sells through dispensaries doesn't like it, so there's political pressure there. There's the bill author who feels swindled by the hemp industry over AB 45 from the bill author for AB 2223. So there's probably pressure there. And I just doubt the governor really cares enough to actually like have a sensible policy on this because to him, it's just like, well, it's weed, it goes in dispensaries. And that's kind of the attitude we see in a lot of these adult use states where hemp products are being sold. I mean, Missouri, for example, just, the governor issued an executive order by strange coincidence after accepting tens of thousands of dollars in donations from cannabis companies, but unrelated. A few days later, he passed an executive order banning all intoxicating hemp products in Missouri, and then they're aggressively trying to enforce that even today. Whereas like Georgia is going through a public comment process to come up with the right
Right.
regulations, and guess what? They don't have adult use cannabis dug in there either.
Hmm.
And the major, I think, medical operator there is probably going to get in the hemp game in that state. And so ultimately, this is like we're in this weird state of flux because I truly believe by this time next year, once the farm bill is settled, every major cannabis company is going to be making a hemp product or another, and that's why everything is going to swing back around. But right now, you have like half of them doing it and half of them fighting it, and it's just creating this like really nightmare scape of like I can't sell this in basically most liberal states right now, which is weird to say,
Right.
but I can sell it across most of the South. Um, it's like we can argue about what happened in Florida too is a whole other kind of issue, but
Hmm.
ultimately, like we need sensible hemp regulations in this country, and I haven't really seen the left or the right come up with sensible ones because most people just don't understand it well enough. And fair enough, that's kind of I think a fair position to be at because why would you know this much about hemp if you are anybody outside this industry? Because it is a really, really nuanced thing that you have to understand that we created two classes of the same plant in this country, and it's just with ungodly complicated laws.
Yeah. Yeah, again, we don't have to get into it, but I've got friends and I know people that are in some of those southern states that are like this hemp stuff should be illegal. And I'm like, but wait a minute, it's the only way you're able to acquire THC legally, but whatever.
Yeah. Was it
Whatever.
the THCO ruling from yesterday,
I was
right?
gonna
Like the
ask you
denying
about that.
THCO in North
Yeah.
Carolina, which is like distinctively just reaffirms that the federal definition of hemp does include basically anything that's not Delta 9 THC, which really is like a big win for the THCA community. But you know what the first email I got this morning was a marketing email from MC Nutraceuticals saying, "Hey, federally legal D9 THCO." Because they're immediately selling it again. And it's just like, I get it. Maybe it is legal. That doesn't mean you should sell it. I mean,
Right.
THCA, I think, is a wholly different question because,
Right.
we have millennia around basically weed because it is just straight up weed. There may be pesticides involved. Testing probably needs improvement, but ultimately that's just weed. Whereas THCO is like largely been something people started to create like 10, 20 years ago before hemp and have like really flourished under the farm bill and just like we
Hmm.
don't know what it does to people. It's not just THCO, it's like all of these different acronyms. It's like to me that's really no different than a research chemical. And I don't know if I've said this to you before, Cole, but like honestly, if I could find enough steps in synthesis between the CBD and methamphetamine, would that mean that methamphetamine is legal so long as it's hemp derived? I don't know. I don't think so, but
Right.
like maybe it crosses into new territory once it becomes a new controlled substance. It's hard for me to say, but like that's where it's like I'm not really in the mood ever to give the DEA ammunition because I don't really care for that organization. But at the same time, it's like we should probably like I'm a big fan of trying to self-regulate and create sensible regulations. I don't know
Hmm.
that like selling THCO is one of those. I could have a more, I think, thoughtful argument about Delta 8 THC or other things that are, Delta 8 occurs in the plant. I've seen it as I used to be an extractor, and I've seen Delta 8 come out in extracts as high as like 8, 9% sometimes. And so like I know that it's there and that's legitimate, but basically, I'm in the opinion of like phytocannabinoids largely probably fine. I still think we should prove safety and efficacy around things that we claim. But anything that's synthetic, and doesn't exist as a phytocannabinoid, what Minnesota classifies as artificial, should probably be, or no, sorry, Minnesota classifies phytocannabinoids man-made as artificial. But anything that's synthetic, which does not exist as a phytocannabinoid, I think we should be really circumspect about, creating, selling, ingesting. But whole
Yeah.
other argument, I guess. And
Yeah.
have one
No,
makes me
I'm
no friends in the hemp industry, like from Americans for Healthy Alternatives. But
no, I mean, I'm pretty well right there with you, and that's the page I wish we could all get on, which is like, Delta 9, THCA, the like your company, correct me if I'm wrong, you're very specific about being naturally derived THC and your
yeah.
and I just wish everybody like it I get a little like because it's like I agree with everything you just said and everything that people say about THCO and these like sprayed nugs and everything, but I get mad when they lump that in with THCA. It
Hmm.
seems like they're all too quick to do that, and it's like hold on, like
I
keep it
think
separate.
there's the problem too is that there are hemp operators that are all too quick to do that too. Like I
True.
saw my brother-in-law had like a THCA vape is what it was claimed to be, and then I actually went to the website where they had the test results. And this is the first time he showed me one of these things because he's had other stuff before that actually went to a test result at all because a lot of them don't. Um, but the test result was like 25% THCA and then 50% Delta 8 THC, but nowhere on the package did it say Delta 8. And then there was no batch code. There was just like a single result for a flavor. So like the problem, like the hemp operators also create problems for themselves by like, not being kind of sticking to a standard.
Hmm.
So like it would probably be easier if all the stuff that is claimed to be THC actually was, but some of it may just be like CBD flower sprayed with Delta 8 and like, I feel like you can tell because I've seen these sprayed flowers. They look like hay. Like
Right.
I've extracted better stuff that we would
Hmm.
get from like old, like when I was in California extracting, like we would get 300 keys or so a week in under Prop 215. Like some of that stuff was like as brown as it comes, and like I've seen worse stuff sold at hemp shops, and it's just like I don't understand what we're doing here. But I especially don't understand why some hemp operators are calling that safe and legal access to cannabis in Florida. um, Whatever. I mean, the fact is we legalized weed in 2018 by accident, and we're just gonna have to deal with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And like that's the thing. I really think that what we're talking about, those products like yours will proliferate because people will have experiences along the way. I truly believe if you get swindled into trying one of those THCO products, like you're gonna, hopefully it's not too, again, you should know what you're buying and it should be labeled accurately and everything else like that. I truly do believe
Hmm.
that. But if you still somehow make that mistake, like you're gonna learn just like we do with alcohol. Like I learned that high proof alcohol, not for me. I learned that in college, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I mean,
So
some people will decide that they do like it and they'll keep using it. Hopefully, they
exactly.
don't have terrible ramifications, but that
Right.
is kind of a choice that I suppose, as long as you are aware that this is like basically an untested research chemical, if you want to keep buying and consuming it because you like what it does, that's kind of up to you. But
Right.
that, to most people, that's you and I talking about radical drug policy, which is,
I was about to
criminalization of all
say.
drugs. Like, I mean, if people want to use heroin until they die, like, I mean, that's in my opinion, that's their business, but that's bad politics for a lot of people. So it really is like a lot of it comes back to well, people just make the argument about for the kids and like, well, we should prevent people from accessing improve access to things, and parents should have those conversations with their children. I have a 1 year old now, and he's just starting to get into stuff all the time. I have to be really careful about where I leave my cantrip
Hmm.
around. And the lids help, but also like even if the lid's closed or the can is unopened, I'm not going to leave that within his reach. So it goes on a counter or it goes
Yeah.
way up there. And it's the same for by the way, the Sunny D vodka seltzers, if we bring those into our house, because those exist too.
Or, the cleaning products you have in your house. I'm sure you don't let your kid get close to
Yeah, if you have a
those,
bunch of child resistant locks on everything, it's
Yeah.
like my whole life is child resistant right now.
Yeah.
So it's just like we're so desperate for sensible policy in this country on cannabis. It's like you can't really find it anywhere anymore. Like not from whole cloth. Like we banned the hemp products in Massachusetts, but what did that do? That took products like Cantrip off the shelves. Guess what? I can still go down to a store on the other side of town and find you some Skittles branded, Delta 8 THC gummies. And Delta 8's been illegal for here for 2 years because again,
Yeah.
it's we don't have any money to do the enforcement of these things. And they had a hearing a couple months ago, right before they passed this, or before the ABCC issued this giant warning. And most of the regulators who were saying we should pull these products from shelves were also saying we have no resources to pull these products from shelves. I'm like, I know how I can solve this problem for you all at the same time. It's just, but we lost that battle here. And like
Yeah.
I said, firmly, I believe all of this stuff will come back around because people love cannabis and people love accessing things easier. So it'll take years, but once the farm bill is settled again, I'm hoping that we'll see federal legislation introduced separate from the farm bill that starts to put some guide rails around on hemp.
Yeah. Well, I know you got to go here in a second, but just a few more questions for you. Just curious, do these bans, when they happen in state levels, are they able to ban online sales?
I mean, they do put it in legislation, but I don't know how they would ever enforce that. I mean, like,
Right.
what are they going to do? Show up at your home? Are they going to audit? They could audit your business records. I did hear once about Oregon doing a sting a couple years ago, where like a regulator ordered it and then issued a citation for the brand that shipped it to them, so they could do that. New Jersey's current bill proposes like $100, then $1,000, then a $10,000 fine for every violation of selling them online. But like, is that going to bother the people who are selling these products on Amazon just as quote unquote full spectrum hemp?
Right.
Probably not. I know a lot of brands still ship to like Connecticut, where that's not you're not allowed to sell stuff into Connecticut either. But like, how is the state going to figure that out? I do not know. But
Yeah.
ultimately, if it were to move in the direction of alcohol, you would probably see a direct to consumer ban, which is really why I'm not building as much around the DTC part of this business. But it's a hard thing to turn down entirely when it's still allowed. It's just hard to make a profit on, but that's a whole other question.
Yeah. I asked that because I know in Illinois they were talking about doing a ban. And by the way, it looked a lot similar to today's. If folks want to check it out, I'll put the
Yeah.
links to my
It's the same
coverage.
thing they did in New Jersey. So, Susanna Short, I believe, was testifying, even though she had just been fired by the NJCTA or something like that. I don't know the details of that, but she had a cancer product and she had a bunch of those, and it's like you realize all those products are illegal in the first place just on
Right.
copyright issue, right? Like these are
Yeah.
not
And
legal, and the people who are making those. You think they care about what Gavin Newsom says at a press conference? No, but like I care, and my distributors care, and my retailers care, and we're going to pull those products. But anyone who's selling Trips Ahoy is not going to stop because you said this can't be sold at Total Wine.
right. To your point, I will just show you what happens if you're a licensed cannabis company and you do something like that.
There you go.
I had that one quick for you. You know what
Yeah,
I
because
mean? Like,
there was the is this over the strain name or is this
yeah, exactly. This was in 2021. They were suing over the name and some of
oh
the logos as well. But like to your point, if you are licensed under the state, then there's a mechanism of enforcement to deal with
mm-hmm.
copyright. But if you're
Yeah.
not, if you're not, licensed, then yeah, you can
Yeah.
just buy packaging. I
Yeah.
mean, it's not
A-
illegal.
And like on the licensing note, I'd love to leave you with this, which is that like here's what sensible policy in California could and should look like. Create a cap for how much THC can be in a hemp beverage. I would suggest 10 milligrams, just like they have in Minnesota. Have every brand, manufacturer, retailer, and distributor register for a license, pay a fee, and have collected, 10-20% tax on it, and then hire a whole bunch of inspectors, go shut down everybody selling medicated Skittles and Trips Ahoy across the state. And look, now you have a thriving economy that by the way, because I mean, if it was just beverage that was allowed, you wouldn't really be taking much away from dispensaries who barely sell beverages in the first place. Check out some headset or public data; it's less than 1% of sales. Gummies are definitely a trickier issue, but I'm not going to advocate for banning anything in particular, but at the end of the day, like there's certain things that are in dispensaries that are important to those operators, and there's certain things that are not. And beverage is one of those things that are not.
Yeah, two quick questions. I hope this first one's quick. Why
Sure.
the dosage cap?
Oh, I don't think a good dosage cap is actually like sensible policy. I just think it's good
Good
politics.
start. Yeah,
Yeah,
good
I
starting
mean, at
stuff.
the end of the day, I think there should be a serving size cap, but I don't think there should be a beverage cap. I own a distillery. I could go online right now and register a 355 milliliter can of vodka with, no reclosable lid,
That's
and people
kind of my
I could
point.
sell
Yeah.
it. So what is the best policy? You shouldn't put a milligram cap on it,
Right.
but it protects cannabis operators a little bit better because then they don't have to worry about competing with, higher dose products outside of the market. And frankly, like Total Wine, for example, won't sell anything above 10 milligrams. So you're kind of in a state of affairs where like a lot of regulators are trying to get good boy points or operators trying to get good boy points by only selling up to 10 milligrams. But I don't think it's actually good policy because people just drink more beverages, or which is I guess not a bad thing, but a lot of times they don't want to. Like I think you should allow basically beer, wine, spirits versions of these things. You just have to have it clearly marked, and
Right.
maybe require more child resistance around higher dose products, maybe require more clear labeling, or God forbid, like a volume requirement. But there's all sorts of ways to cut that. But at the end of the day, it's like not the most politically popular thing, particularly in California, where the industry is so entrenched. To be honest, when they were going through AB 2223 negotiations, the concept that you'd get any more than 5 milligrams approved was basically thrown out of hand. So we thought we'd end up with probably a 5 milligram cap.
Gotcha. And last question again. Hope this one's quick. Were you surprised to see your product? I should have
Yeah,
asked
it
this
was
question earlier.
actually. I mean, it's not shocking because I guess like I said, they've been targeting Total Wine since the
Sure.
beginning. If you look at Aguiar Curry's initial tirade on the assembly floor earlier this year, she
Hmm.
had North Canada there, who's also on this table, and Mary Jones, who was also sold at Total Wine. So they were part of that. They're literally going to Total Wine because they're so mad this major retailer is doing it because they have the most locations in California, and in many ways, they're pioneers in this space, and I have a lot of respect for our partners there, and they've done a great job at ensuring compliance. And by the way, they go very much out of their way to make sure everything is super clear in store about what you're buying. If they put something in like a glass case, for example, they will put extra tape on the outside to delineate, make sure you don't confuse a wine bottle with a THC beverage. Total Wine goes so far out of its way to make sure that it's selling only to adults and only adults who want the product so that nobody is confused. Like it's
Right.
unbelievable anyone would want to attack them over that. But but I was surprised to see Cantrip right there, especially because they had so much endo around it. And they're a great brand, and I know they're only sold at Total Wine in California, at least according to the founder. But like to see Cantrip nestled there was very funny because it's just I follow national politics for all sorts of non-cannabis reasons, and with Gavin Newsom so much in the news lately, I'm just like, it's one of the coolest things about consumer packaged goods that it's not the most positive thing in this case, but like you touch so many people that you never expect. Like Gavin Newsom has now been in the room with my product, like, and so I have had, some very, very, very minor impact on his life. And like, you never know how many millions of people you'll touch when you start putting out products. And because I formulate all of those and I worked on the brand, it's like, it's personal to me that way. So that was actually kind of cool in a way that is not so positive, but hopefully we'll get a more positive news conference where Gavin Newsom will get up, say these things are allowed now, and chug one on camera.
Hell yeah, I like it. That's a good note to end on. Well, Adam, thank you for joining me today on such quick notice to talk about this. And folks, check out drinkcantrip.com. I'll have the link in the show notes.
Thanks so much, Cole.
Yep. Thanks, Adam. Take care.